Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of 4 videos I'll be doing for this year of Bionicle. This one will focus on the Lord of Skull Spiders and wrap up my general thoughts on the Winter Wave. Okay, so let's talk about the Lord of Skull Spiders himself. Right away, people may notice that his piece count is much higher than that of any of the Toa, even the more expensive ones. Almost 150 pieces for $15, eh? That's about the same as a traditional brick-based system set. People really shouldn't feel gypped for having to pay more for less for the Toa though, because you're really not. Yeah, this guy has more pieces, but they're mostly very small, plain, easy to make pieces. Bionicle and Hero Factory sets have always typically seemed kind of expensive if we're just going by numbers alone, because Bionicle-ish pieces tend to be bigger and more specialized and harder to produce than good old Lego bricks, even now. This guy though is just a pile of good old Technic parts, like the Rahi from the days of old. His construction is very involved and will take significantly longer to piece together than Tahoe and the others, simply because there's so many little things going on at once. And even if you take your time, chances are most of you are going to make at least one mistake somewhere. I made 2. As it all comes together though, it's fun to see how the mechanism works, and it feels very rugged once everything's all linked up. Just add the legs, some shells, and you're done. Lord of Skull Spiders is definitely not for everybody. He's a huge departure from this year's Toa, who I feel the closest thing we've ever gotten to a perfect evolution of everything we've come to love about construction sets over the years, in terms of build and style, at least for some people. Lord of Skull Spiders takes a step way back to 2001 for better or worse, focusing almost entirely on a built-in function made possible by old-school lift arms and pins and axles and gears and rubber bands, and even a few new spins on those tried-and-true elements. It feels right in line with the Nui Rama, Nui Jaga, and all the other funny-sounding named things from back in the day. And personally, I love this approach in small doses like this, something to have on occasion as a reminder of the series' roots, though he does suffer in some respects because of it. Because so much focus is placed on the Gimmick, which we'll get to in a minute, his poseability is pretty limited and the armor feels kinda skimpy, we'll say. You can make some decent poses with what few joints there are to work with, but since they're all perfectly level, the most you can really do is make him look slightly more aggressive or timid depending on how he's standing, because standing is the most he can really do. It's not really a problem for me since the action makes up for it. It really comes from holding him by the bum and making him lunge at his foes like a jumping spider. Triggering the Gimmick is done by literally squeezing a trigger. In one swift motion, all 6 legs clamp hard around his prey. And see, this is how I imagine a creature like this fighting. Not engaging in actual hand-to-hand combat with a Toa where they can see him, swinging his dinky little feet around like a boss in a video game. No, I don't see Lord of Skull Spiders even giving his enemies a chance for a counter-offensive. I'd see this guy crouched in a burrow or clinging to a dark, shadowy corner of the ceiling, laying in wait for someone to come close, and then attacking them with a single swift motion, pinning them down with his death grip, the victim unable to pry themselves free once he has them. I also see him working like a monster in a horror movie, waiting for the heroes to split up so he can pick them off one by one, striking when they least expect it until they're all down. See, that's the kind of threat I see Lord of Skull Spiders presenting. There's no fighting a monster like this. The best chance you have is to see him coming and find some way to deflect or outmaneuver him and counterattack before he can prepare for another go. But you miss that chance, you blow it and let this guy catch you in a dark corner and it's all over. Done. You're dead. Granted, this is just how I've imagined him. In the online animations, he's treated much differently. Ugh. Anyway, he's just the right size to completely envelop a protector or villager and pull his prey away to do bad things to them, which kinda makes sense since that's all he's had to deal with for who knows how many years. Though it's a little trickier to pull off, he can also grab most Toa. Anu is just a bit too big and heavy. And yeah, he is pretty small, at least in terms of height. He's a low rider and surprisingly will eat up a lot of space on your shelf. I do think he's just big enough to be a threat to at least one Toa at a time. People have joked that all Toa would have to do is step on this guy and that's it, but I don't know. I'm no Toa, but if I saw a spider the size of a football jumping at me, I'd probably cry. And if one big enough to wrap its legs all around me came along, Anyway, I feel this guy gets a bad rep that he totally doesn't deserve, and at least in that regard, I think he fits right in with the rest of this year's sets. I've tried to make him bigger, believe me, but almost everything I did either made the legs super lanky or just too big and heavy for the Gimmick to work. The legs would go down, but then they wouldn't come back up because I put too much of a strain on the rubber band. I guess you could just add another one, but yeah. I think you get away with adding 2 extra legs that match the rest though, as poorly demonstrated here. It does add something to his image and make him a little more terrifying. You could also probably add 1 extra joint to each leg to give them more range without going overboard. The reason I bring this all up though is because I have little doubt in my mind that at one point the guys at LEGO may very well have intended to make this guy larger like in the animations. They probably used some of the techniques I've shown here and may have intended to sell him for $20 or maybe a little more, but maybe something went wrong. Maybe the Gimmick didn't work so well. Maybe he suffered in some other way. Maybe. Who knows? I think in the end though, LEGO downsized this guy a bit to make the Gimmick work and focus more on the construction of the core body, also making him slightly more affordable and less of a pill for skeptics to swallow. In the end, I don't consider it that big of a loss. I'm sorry. Anyway, point is, I think LEGO made whatever decisions they felt were best to make this perform as well as possible as a toy. Not necessarily a figure, but a toy still. And yes, debatable whether or not it's a good idea to make the Gimmick the entire point of a toy, especially seeing how far we've come with the rest of the line. I do think it's a great gimmick though, definitely on par with the Rahi of yore. In the end, I think this will appeal most to people who were around to get a few of the Rahi in 2001 and wouldn't mind getting a little of that back now. I'd say I don't see him being anyone's first purchase, but given how hard it's been for some people to jump on board with CCBS and the new building style of these figures, I think some of those people will gravitate toward this guy first. He has some CCBS elements, but they're mostly superficial and very light at that. The focus here is clearly on the lift arms and whatnot that make up his body, and I believe there will always be a market for that, even if it's smaller than it used to be. And yeah, let's just admit it, as cool as the Rahi were back in the day, they were kind of a mess. Only a few of them really even had any poseability, and they were all built around one attack motion, and they weren't really that big either. That said, some may feel this guy's a regression of things in light of all the steps taken forward with the Toa. But I don't know. Like I said, I think there'll always be a place for neat little things like this sprinkled here and there. In the end, I don't get the impression that this guy is really the villain of the first wave any more than the boss you face at the end of the first stage of a video game is. He's but the first obstacle for the Toa to overcome, and it's just another thing that I think makes him fit right in with similar beasts from the time before time, which for me just took on a whole new meaning. Point is, I don't feel let down by this guy. I think there's more to him than people give him credit for. Besides, have you seen the other villains coming in a few months? If nothing else, I'm looking forward to seeing how well he fits in with the rest of them, as a sixth member of their evil team, truly making them the yin to the Toa's yang. Unless I got that completely backwards. Whatever. You could say we're just getting one of these guys super early. In terms of how he looks, the colors are striking. The little white barb-like hairs are intimidating and evoke a real tarantula. I don't find that odd that he's missing 2 legs since he's an alien spider. I like the moving mandibles, and I even like the face printing, though it's a little spotty and I don't feel quite as much care was put into applying this as a Toa's chest printings. Along with the mandibles, his face is actually kind of posable. He can look around a bit, which can look kind of awkward, but hey, the option is there. The only thing I don't like about this guy in terms of his looks is his butt. I think a lot more could have been done to make the body more spider-like, but it's just a few generic plates lazily slapped on, which is really disappointing considering these same sorts of pieces are used to much greater effect on every single other set we've looked at so far. That said, it's pretty easy to make him look better by adding just a few more pieces without putting any strain on the legs of the Gimmick. In fact, you only need one, like this. I don't know how well this is going to show on camera, but just this one piece was all it took to make this guy seem a fair bit more imposing and complete. He's sleeker, he's fatter, he's just more roundish and like a spider. That along with an extra pair of legs that match the rest should make this guy feel more like you're getting the whole package. There are lots of little fixes like this you can make, but we shouldn't have to make our own fixes for sets like these. I mean, it's always great when we can. Finding ways to make things even better in our own way is something LEGO encourages. But I really don't think adding 1 or 2 elements like this should have been so hard for LEGO to include. Come on guys, throw us a bone here. Anyway, Lord of Skill Spiders is lukewarm. I like him, but I feel like more could have been done with him, like almost everyone else seems to. That said, I just can't find it in me to call him a bad set or even a mediocre one. He comes with a lot of good parts, including new ones that monkeys have dreamed of having for years, and his build is inspired and very retro. Unfortunately, that still seems to carry all of the shortcomings something like this would have had back in the day, and he is kind of the odd man out next to everything we've gotten so far this year. These things that show how much construction sets have evolved, so much so that they do kind of leave him in the dust and make him kind of a dinosaur, an afterthought. Even so, I don't think this guy deserves all the flack he's gotten. In a way, he's kind of become the underdog of this year's sets for me, and I do think people should give him a chance. He is a good set, it's just that the others are great sets. Before wrapping up my thoughts on Lord of Skill Spiders and other things, this feels like a good time to talk about his minions, the Skill Spiders themselves. Similar to how the masks clip onto the heads of the other figures, the Skull Spiders can latch onto them facehugger style. You can even curl some of the legs around the back of the head, making them hard to shake loose. These things are too cool. I think they're a wonderful successor to the Krana and Krata that came with a Borak and Rakshi, and if anything, I think they're a little better. Thanks to the legs, they're a lot more interactive and lifelike, and the idea of these things being enough of a threat that they can just jump around, possessing or even killing people all on their own is really upping the ante since those days. Granted, it would be nice to have some bigger threats, but that's where the summer wave comes in. I also love that every single winter wave set, save one, sort of, comes with one of these things right out of the box. You can now create a conflict with but a single set. No matter which Toa protector you buy, they all have something to fight. Of course, it can only be so much, since it's pretty obvious where the focus of these sets really lies, but it's just another thing to add even more play value to these sets that are already exploding at the seams with it, and it really shows where your dollars are going. They also pile up pretty quickly, and before long you can have a whole horde of these things clamoring over your heroes and their masks. I also love the look of them. Worn as a mask, it's a very tribal and wicked looking thing, with fierce eyes and a disproportionately humongous forehead. I also find it kinda neat how, between the fangs, you can see just a bit of the wearer's chin, making it look like the spider could be clinging to the victim and controlling them by biting their face. Too gruesome? Well, anyway, the eye holes of the Toa's masks are kinda hit or miss, but the eye holes of these fit perfectly, giving them all a sort of clarity that's kinda scary. It's almost like the wearers are somebody else's masks now. Ooh. Lastly, I love the colors. The dark blue ones look like they could easily hide in the dark, waiting to surprise somebody. The silver ones look particularly tough, and the bright green ones are my favorites. The color is very alien and toxic looking, very much like creatures in the wild you don't want to go anywhere near without gloves or something. It also kinda harkens back to creatures like the blue Nui Jaga, I think, who had a similar poisonous feel just from looking at them. Overall, I think the Skull Spiders are a great addition to the Winterwave sets that really show LEGO going the extra mile with these, and they're a fitting army for the Lord of Skull Spiders to lord over. All of that said, while you don't exactly get a Skull Spider with a Lord of Skull Spiders, you do get this, a golden skull. Not so much a spider. It's just a Skull Spider without any legs, but its potential story significance is what makes it a great sell for me. Supposedly, this is what gives the Lord of Skull Spiders his power over the other Skull Spiders, and it's just one of any number of things he's guarding in the old city. Now, in theory, anyone who wears this mask is given complete control over all of the Skull Spiders and their victims. One person could possess every single individual attacked by a Skull Spider. Jeez, just think about what this means. If someone like, say, Makuta were to get his hands on this mask, he would win. You could make a story where everyone gets taken over by Skull Spiders, even the Toa, and it's up to some Takua analog to take it at the last minute, freeing every one of the Skull Spiders' control or something like that. Unfortunately, they haven't really gone down any route like that, and it's just wasted potential at this point. But hey, it opens plenty of doors for fanfictions. Now let's talk about some of the other things I have yet to cover. I don't usually like to talk about boxes that come with most toys, but these ones I find particularly inspired. They're not the canisters of old, but they have lots of subtle angles and lines that give them a very striking sort of shape. None of them will be big enough to fit an entire figure inside once assembled, but oh well. After years of fruit snack bags, I've gotten used to throwing the packaging of construction figures away. But I feel really bad about doing that to these because they're just so darn pretty. I mean, look at this box art. Each of the Toa's boxes shows them in the wilderness, on their quest to nab their golden mask, and the Protector's box art gives us a good look at the villages they hail from. The architecture of the villagers' dwellings is kinda samey from each one to the next, but how they're built to fit in each extreme environment is what makes them interesting. It's so cool to see these people living on a giant stalactite or the sheer drop of a mountainside, or underwater, or however they make that work. The two moons in some backgrounds do a great job conveying what a different alien sort of world this is, and even places like the island's underworld have this intense, mystical quality to them that's very Bionicle. It takes me right back to the good old days and is so much more inspired than any Hero Factory box art, or even the box art of some of Bionicle's later years where there wasn't really any scenery, just lightning or bubbles. These environments are colorful and creative and alive and wonderful. The boxes, while kinda weak in some respects, are simply a thing of beauty. Now for the combination models. There's not much to say about them. You just take some of the Protector's gear and slap it on their respective Toa. Tau gets a shoulder-mounted turret and a double flamethrower thingy. Gali gets turbines and a bigger version of whatever this thing's supposed to be. Kapaka gets... Anua gets some extra beefcake and the star drill. Puata gets the staff, which I think suits him very well. And Leba gets a crossbow, some armor, and the Protector of Jungle's feelers. Yeah, I'll be honest, most of these are pretty weak. I mean, some of them are okay. The only one I feel is really bad or suffers is Kopaka. Partly for reasons I've already explained in the Toa Mega review, and whose weapons are a jumbled mess and feel like a big downgrade from his shield and formerly less unwieldy, more efficient lance. Tahu and Anu are okay, but nothing outstanding. Gali and Boatu are pretty good, but the best combination by far I feel is Leiwa's. He doesn't lose as much of himself as the others do because he's kind of a blank slate right from the start, so the Protectors can only add to him. Overall, these are alright, though I have seen better takes on such things from the fans. Again, Leiwa seems to have fared the best this way, though you can go kinda crazy with the others. I didn't think LEGO had it in them to whip up a combination like this. Still, I prefer to leave them in their default modes most of the time. They just feel less cluttered and look nicer on the shelf this way. I don't know, this just seems to be how they work best for me. One last thing worth noting. I've never let the red and blue pins get to me all that much, since I can understand why LEGO's pushed that sort of thing in recent years. They want to make these pieces easier for kids to spot at the bottom of a bin filled with LEGOs, since that's where pieces like these usually eventually fall to. I do find it a little much on Anua though. He has them everywhere. They only really start to look bad when you view them from behind, but yeah, I'm probably going to switch these out for black ones in the near future. The only reason I didn't bring this up in the Toa Mega review is because I've come to accept it as a necessary evil we'll just have to put up with from now on. However, I have to commend LEGO on one thing. A few years ago, I got the Witch Doctor set from the Hero Factory line. Heck, I still have him mostly intact. And this guy has balls up the wazoo. And they're all red. Sure, it works for his color scheme, but part of me was seriously worried they might start coloring all ball joints like this. Thankfully they didn't, but could you imagine how much worse these guys would look if they all had bright red ball joints on top of the little red, blue, and yellow bits they already have? Their color schemes would be destroyed. Sure, maybe it would have worked well enough on Tahu, but on anyone else it would look hideous. I don't even want to try it. Just the mental image should be enough for anybody to see how garish that would be. And for the looks of things, it was enough for LEGO to realize that would push things just a little too far over the threshold of whatever we're willing to tolerate. Thank you, LEGO, for not making these guys unbearably ugly and hard to look at. We got a lot of great recolors this year, but that was one we didn't need and nobody asked for. I'd say we all dodged a bullet there. Anyway, that's all I really have to say about these in terms of looking at one set or another. At one point, I was going to save my big speech about CCBS and all that stuff for this video, but I kinda already got that out of the way in the last one because I felt it would be more relevant there, and it seems it was for the best, so yeah. When all is said and done, I think Bionicle's return is a smashing success, at least in terms of set design and play value. You already know what I think about these. The characters, the masks, the weapons, the gimmicks, the return to a more colorful, elemental feel that was kinda missing in those later years, all that stuff. In terms of the story, well, that's another story. I think the animation's had a strong start, and I and many others have been waiting patiently for something exciting to follow, but let's just say those new books can't get here fast enough. I feel there's a lot of potential for this new line's world, which will undoubtedly get more expansive and complex as we explore more and more of it, but in terms of making a first impression, Bionicle's comeback has been kinda lukewarm in some respects. And that's pretty worrisome because I haven't seen a lot of kids picking these off the shelves, and I think it's because they simply don't understand what they're getting into, even as much as LEGO's try to strip down everything and make it easier to understand. Maybe today's kids are just too different after all, but I dread the thought. There are kids who are being introduced to Bionicle and falling in love with it to this day. Even some who wish they had the chance to get some of the older ones because they preferred that look. Go figure. So yeah, there's still a spark there even now. We can only hope there's enough of us and them for the voice of Bionicle and everything it stands for to ring true for years to come. And I'm honestly kind of worried that Bionicle may get pushed to the wayside if LEGO doesn't make the new world of Bionicle more welcoming to adventurous young minds. For now, I think they're playing it a little too safe. There's a lot of stories you can use your imagination to tell with these guys, but I don't know, we're still early in the year, but I was hoping for a little more by now. With the LEGO movie making bricks bigger than ever, I don't want Bionicle to become some niche thing that only really appeals to old fools like me. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things play out throughout the year. That said though, these are fun to build and great for play, which is why I bought all of them. None of them really feel incomplete or like LEGO should have done more with them save the Lord of Skull Spiders and maybe a Protector or two. The Toa are great, the Protectors are great, Lord of Skull Spiders is okay, and believe it or not, I do recommend him if you're planning on getting more than a few of the other sets, even if only for having such a nifty, unique new build that you're only going to see once. He feels like something a time traveler plucked out of 2001 and carried into the future, adding a little pizzazz from things of his own time. For some, it's something they've long moved past, but for others, like me, this sort of thing still works. He's cheap, he's interesting, he's something. Even if you just can't stand him, well, he still makes a great parts pack. I mean it, he comes with a lot of stuff. Bionicle 2015's Winter Wave gets a big thumbs up from me all across the board. I'm still not quite sure how I feel about the Summer Wave, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, yeah, see you then. For now, it's back to game reviews. Hopefully I'll get one finished before the Summer Wave rolls around. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching these reviews and supporting me in everything I do, guys. Doodles!